So, okay, we start. So we'll start with Visual Force first. So first thing that we are going to discuss is about using CSS and JavaScript in Visual Force, right? How do we use CSS and JavaScript in Visual Force? So before that, before we get into this, everyone on mute, please. Okay. So before we start talking about using CSS or JavaScript in Visual Force, let us understand CSS and JavaScript. I think most of you are aware of that. So for those who do not know, CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, which is used for styling. Most of the times it is used for styling the HTML, HTML markups, right? So if you want to control, if you have seen that using HTML you can design things, but to give them that, kind of the color and the font size, those things are controlled using CSS. So for those who are not aware of CSS or who have not got much exposure to it, I will suggest you this link, which is w3schools.com. So I think I told you earlier about this for learning HTML. Now you can use the same link for CSS as well. So just go to w3schools.com and then click on Learn CSS. Alright. If you see in CSS there are things, how do you control the background, how do you control the text, fonts. Okay. So all these things can be done using your CSS. So you don't have to do anything in CSS. Basically you first of all define a style and then you call that style while writing the code or while you write the tag. So that is how CSS works. So the same CSS thing can be done on Salesforce as well, for our Visual Force pages. Alright, so we can write a style and then we can call it on the Visual Force components. The way I think we will take an example here on W3 Schools. If you see CSS for text, okay, so that for text formatting, color blue, color this, that, all that stuff. So this is how you need to define the CSS and everything. Alright. So let's go and use one CSS on this thing on Visual Force page. Just give me a moment. Let me log in into Salesforce. Dev edition. So we create a new page here, and on that we will use the CSS. Alright, now let's say on your page you have this thing, how are you? Alright, this is what you have on your page, and now you want to control the formatting of this. Then you should, before you start writing the Visualforce code within Apex page, before you start writing Visualforce, just define the style. Within this you write your style. Give the style any name and then you just write it this way. Now how will you call this from your within the component? So for component, to call it within component, most of the Visualforce components have an attribute for style. So, but page block, like tab style, but this is for tab, this is not for the text. Output text. Okay, so this is how it will work. Let me delete this one now. Correct. So you could have written other attributes also for the kind of formatting you need. So you have a complete list, what you write, how you write. I've just used the color thing. You can write whatever you want. The font sizes, that font family, putting a border, everything, right? So first thing that you have to do, in case you have not worked on CSS, spent like 2 hours on the CSS thing. It's very simple, very easy. You just have to write these things. That's it. So spend a couple of hours on CSS, and then you see how easy it is to bring things here. So this way you can control the formatting on the page. All right, that is number one. Now same way, the way we have written our CSS. So you just have to if you're writing the CSS on this page, you will have to start the style and close the style, and then you write your normal Visualforce code and then call those style classes here. All right. Now similarly, JavaScript is also used. So the next thing that we were talking about is JavaScript. So similarly, if you just come here and click on JavaScript, you will get to know a little about JavaScript. So I would suggest people who are not aware of JavaScript can spend some time on this. What is JavaScript? CSS is for styling. Okay. Now what is JavaScript? JavaScript is actually a very lightweight programming language. Not a complete programming, it's more of a scripting language. So what do we do in JavaScript basically? I'll tell you. See, Visualforce we have seen is a markup language. It's a markup language, right? Now Visualforce is not able to execute any logic. You cannot explain, or you cannot put any logic in Visualforce. That is what we have seen. What we have seen is Visualforce is only used for the designing markups. It's only for designing. I cannot pass on an action through Visualforce. All right. Same thing happens with HTML also. HTML is a complete markup language, and it has got nothing, no option. It has got no option to perform any action. So in that case, JavaScript helps you to put small actions into that Visualforce thing. Right? For small things, you will not go to creating a controller and putting the logics and everything, right? So small actions and all those things can be done using JavaScript. Like on click of a button, you want to throw a message. Are you sure you want to save this? We see these kind of things, right? So for these small pop-ups, or an alert that you want to throw, for these you can easily use JavaScript. So you can see JavaScript examples here, a lot of them. JS comments is basically commenting something. Functions, events, strings, numbers. Alright, I will use a simple example. Alert. Okay, so here is the alert box. So there are different types of alert boxes, confirm boxes and all. So I'm just gonna use one of this. I will just use alert. So alert is where you have to press OK to proceed. Same thing, I mean nothing you have to do, you just need to write this alert on the script. So for using JavaScript, you have to write it within script. You will start script, and then within that you will write the script. So whatever script you want to write. Got this thing? So we have put an alert on this. The same way you can write something that you want to call on a button. So as I told you, most of these Visualforce components have an attribute for style. Most of them have attribute for some JavaScript action also, right? In case you want to perform, especially the buttons, the action buttons and all those things. So sometimes it happens that, okay, before that saving of the record, you created a save button. Before saving of the record, you just want to before you save the record, you want to prompt the user, are you sure you want to save the record? He says okay. So that kind of thing. You will see the JavaScript action here. So JavaScript action here can be put through these things: on click, on complete. These are the JavaScript actions. This is where you can call. So on click, on double click. So if you want some JavaScript to work on double click, if you want some JavaScript to work on a single click. See, so this kind of thing. Got this? So JavaScript, again, as I told you, if you are not good in JavaScript, or if you have not worked on that, don't worry. And let me tell you one thing. Please give me a minute. 1 minute, please. So what I was suggesting is you would not need to become an expert in CSS or JavaScript. Your focus should be still more on Visualforce and Apex, but you just need to know how to use CSS and JavaScript on Visualforce. Yeah, you need to have a bit of understanding. Spend not more than 2 hours on each of these. Okay, and for people who already know, I don't think you need to spend much of time on this. So if you only know how to use this thing, it's fine. All right. And whenever you're practically designing a page, you always have to refer to this. I mean, as I told you earlier, that for HTML also, HTML tags and all, most of the times we refer back to this link or something else. For JavaScript and CSS also, how things are written, most of the times we refer back to this. So we don't have to know each and everything in JavaScript or CSS, just how to use that in Salesforce. Alright. So here is the link. Okay. Now, using static resources. Okay. So next thing that we are going to talk about is using static resource. What is static resource? Static resources, if you want some of the resources to be used in your programming, or to be called in your programming, those you have to upload on cloud. Okay, so I'll start with a very simple example. Let's say on the Visualforce page you are designing, if you want a small image, okay, now that image that comes on the Visualforce page, that needs to be saved somewhere, that has to be saved somewhere, right? So if you save that on your local hard disk, will someone be able to access it from some other locations? No, because the entire system is on cloud. So the image which is being referenced, that should also be on cloud. Otherwise that page will not be able to call that image. Got it? Similarly, if you have style sheets or these script sheets, now for people who are not aware of this, you will always not write CSS or JavaScript on the page itself. So when you become a little more expert in this, and you have too much of styling to be done, you want to write a big style sheet, then instead of writing it on the page, you can also write it in a different file, okay, and save it as a style sheet. So that is an option. So using CSS can happen in 3 ways. If you see it here, it is there somewhere. I do not know in which link it is, but it is explained. Actually, CSS can be written in 3 ways: inline, in page, and in a style sheet. Style sheet means you write it in a different file. Instead of making your page code lengthy, you create a different style sheet file, save it, and then call the class from there. So the same thing, call the style class from there. So same thing is applicable in our Visualforce as well. So if you want, you can write this style on a different file. But the point is that if you create a separate file for that, a style sheet for that, then what you have to do, you have to upload it somewhere. Otherwise, how will Salesforce reference? If you created a file, where do you put that file? You cannot keep it on your local system, right? So that is where your static resource will come into picture. So you'll have to upload it on your static resource. So static resource is nothing but a place provided by Salesforce where you can upload your supporting files and all those things. So things which have JavaScript, if you have some files which hold JavaScript, if you have some file which holds your CSS, if you have some file which has what do you call this, images, these kind of things can be there on static resource. Okay, so for static resource, what you have to do, you have to go to setup, just follow this nicely. go to setup, under create, not create, develop, static resources. Okay, so you need to upload your static resources here. Alright, so whatever your static resources, it can be any file format. I mean, if you want to use image, all those things, or see, use static resources to upload content that you want to reference in a Visualforce page. So all the content that you want to reference in a Visualforce page, including .zip, .jar, images, style sheets, JavaScript, right? So style sheets and JavaScript files can also be put on the static resource thing. Now once you have put that, give me a minute. I'll just share a link with you guys. So once you have uploaded a file as a static resource, this is how you would reference the static resource. How will you then call that static resource on the page? So for images, you will use this Apex image component. You will call it like this, and then you will say URL equals to static resources dot name of the image, and then what will be the width and height. So this is how you are going to call a image on the Visualforce page. But before that, you have to make sure that this file is uploaded on your static resource folder. Same ways, if you want to include script, this is how you have to include the script. If you want to, this is for image, this for script, this is for style sheet. So for image, this should be, this is how you will reference. Uploading is same, go to setup develop, but how to reference that, how to call that on the Visualforce page is different. Include script for JavaScript and style sheet, Apex colon style sheet. So these are the components for calling them. Got it? So that is the thing. So once you have called that, then within this, after this, you can start, calling the classes from this style sheet. So if there is something which is defined in this styles.css, that can be called, right? All right. So this is in fact available on your Visualforce reference guide. I'm also going to share the link to this Visualforce reference guide, but you don't need to go through everything because that will be too confusing for you. So that is what we have here. All right. So this is linked to the Visualforce reference guide, and this is just using static resource. So let me put it here. I'm going to share this document with you guys so that you have all these links and everything. All right. So that's about static resources. Now we have understood static resource. Now there are a few more things that we're going to discuss. Just give me a minute. Now we will talk about creating components in Visualforce. So far what we have done, we have used the components which have been provided by Visualforce. So those are standard components. Now if you want to create a custom component, your own component, then how will you create that? This is again something which you will not require very frequently. One odd case you might require it. So we create a component when we feel that okay fine, there is something that we need to use again and again, and instead of defining the entire thing, what we can do is we can create a component and just call the component for that entire stuff. All right. So that sort of thing. So let's create a component here. How do you create a component for Visualforce? It's very simple. Here it is. You have to go to setup. Develop components. All right. So go to setup, develop components, click on this, and then you can develop your own component. Click on new. I call it ABCD, let's say. Okay. Now, the moment you create a component for Visualforce, you will see that you have a code here which does not start with a page because this is not a page. So this is the Visualforce code you are seeing, which is not starting with the page. So it starts with Apex component. All right. So what you have to do? You have to create the component. It should start with Apex component, end with Apex component. And then within these components, you can put whatever you want. Fine. And whenever you call this component, all this what you have put here will be called there. Got that thing? So hello, this is my new component. So I've created the component, save it. component saved. Now how will you call this component on the Visual Force page? Before that, just see the name of the component. It's ABCD. Okay, so we'll go and call it on the Visual Force page. So for calling the Visual Force component, you should say C. So your custom components will always start with C. The moment you say C, you see, you'll notice that your ABCD component has also appeared here. Got it? Just use this. So the entire story which you defined there has come up here. Got this thing? So you have created a component which can be reused. So anywhere, this could have been a longer section also, right? So anywhere you want to use, if you have certain, page components which you have to repeat or you have to call again and again, you can just create a component and then that component you can call wherever you want. Fine. So that is how it is. So instead of making your code lengthy here, every time writing big things here, just create a component, keep on referencing that component here. Simple. So that is how we create components on Visual Force. There's a very nice workbook that they had. Now I think they have removed that thing. Just trying to locate to that thing. Give me a minute. Right. So they had a very, in fact, a very nice workbook, for small examples of visual force. Recently, it seems they have updated that last week or so, and now they have, not given a very nice thing. So I'm just trying to see if I have a, stored copy of that somewhere. I'll just search it. I was just trying to figure it out. So if I find it, I will definitely share it with you through Google Drive or something. It should be a PDF. I hope I had it, because most of the documentation which Salesforce provides, they are in PDF and HTML format. So that HTML was working, not sure, for last few months, almost a year I have not used the PDF format of that, but I must have saved it somewhere. So just see if I find that. Alright. So these, examples or things which we are talking here, those things are also mentioned in some part of the workbook. So it's a very compact document, very nice thing. So if I find, I will share. Otherwise, I think this document that I am preparing for you, this should also be helpful. It should also help. All right. So now we know how to create a component and how to call the component. So for calling the component, you just have to use C and then colon name of the component. That is how it is. The moment you create a component, custom component, it gets that custom component gets listed in your Visualforce components. In the entire list of Visualforce components, that custom component also comes up. All right. So that is the thing. Now the other thing that we are going to talk about is creating a Visualforce email template. So initially when we did an email template, we saw that we can create an email template with Visualforce as well, right? This is also very simple, not very complex. You just have to go to setup and you will have to go to the email template options for creating a Visualforce email template. Then go to communication templates and then click on email templates and select Visualforce here. So once you select Visualforce in the email templates thing, click on new template, select Visualforce, click on next. Write the subject of the email, recipient type, who will receive this email, contact, lead or user. Contact will receive. Related to type, what will be the related data inside the template. So let's say account data will be related. So a recipient is the person who will receive. Related to, what data will the email template be related to? So I think the same kind of concept we had in other email templates also. So related to data you can include in that email template body. Now click on save. That's it. So your Visualforce email template is ready. Now you just have to go and click on edit template to edit this. So if you edit the template, then you will get to see the code. So this is the code which has been written there. So a Visualforce email template, as this is an email template we saw, for creating a component, thing starts with Apex component. Here, because this is an email template, the first line of the code is messaging email template, right? And then here is the subject. So you can go and change the subject. Subject is a required attribute. Recipient type, who will receive, and related to type. So these are the required attributes on the first line of the code, in case you are writing the code there. And then you will write the plain text body for the email. Alright, put whatever you want to put in the body, and then messaging plain text email body close, and there is where your email template also closes. Alright. Apart from this, there are other components as well under messaging. Instead of plain text body, you could have also used HTML body, right? So if you want to go through the components which can be used in a Visualforce email template, you can always go to the component reference library. If you are here, you can click on this library. In the component reference library, because this is a complete component reference library, and you just want to know more about messaging components, scroll down, you will find messaging components here. So email header, email template, HTML email body, plain text email body. So these are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 components here. Sorry. So these are the different components here. So let's say we just talked about plain text body. So here it is. So plain text body can just have 2 attributes, ID and rendered. Okay, usage is written here. Now this component reference library is a very good thing which you can use in Visualforce. So this is more like a dictionary. We never know, or we never learn all the components. We just go to them and use this component reference for understanding, what kind of functionality we need or what component we need. We'll just go back there and see which component fits our requirement, and then we pick that. Alright. So using component reference library, or knowing how to use component reference library, is very important. because you would have noticed that there are so many components there, right? Now we definitely don't need to know each and everything. Like I don't need to know everything in CSS or everything in JavaScript. I don't need to know all the components in Visualforce, and I also do not need to know all the attributes in all the components. Now when you go to the component reference library, which is here, you will see you click on any component, it will show you what all attributes are there and a usage of it. So whatever number of examples you need, you will get it from here. Now, see, this is a complete email body that they have created using plain text. Similarly, if you want one more example of HTML email body, here it is. Now they have put some HTML coding here. See, if you want, you can just completely copy this, paste it, and then take it to your developer edition and see how it is to be used. But there is no point actually copy pasting. It makes more sense if you understand how it is written. So this is a table on HTML, right? Table defined. How that is. Got this thing. So this is how we will create email templates using Visualforce. Got it? So creating part is pretty simple here. I mean, creating was not difficult, but as you saw that when it creates, it just creates the email template with one basic line, right? So whatever you want to edit, you have to go and click on edit, and then you'll have to edit. So that is the thing. Creating an email template is pretty easy. You just have to go and say new email template Visualforce. That's it. But the actual thing is that once you start, editing the template, or once you start putting some details in the template, that is where you will just need to click on edit template. You will definitely not use this one. So you'll just click on edit template and then edit it. Alright. So that's about using creating email templates in Visualforce. Alright. Where we are. Yes. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do is, I've shared a few things. Spend some time on this. Work on these Visualforce things which we have discussed. These are very simple things. Most importantly, you should be aware of these things, and component reference library and all these things. Yeah. So you should be aware of these things, and whenever required, you should be able to use those things, right? So once we are done with this, now we will move into the Apex part of it. So we'll talk about certain concepts in Apex, which we need to understand. Now we know how to write Apex code and everything. So now we will need to understand a few more things on Apex. So first thing that I want you to understand for Apex is governor limits. Alright. Now what is governor limit? Governor limit is a very simple logic. Salesforce is on cloud, which means it's a multi-tenant environment, multiple people using the same platform. Yes. Now, whenever we are in a multi-tenant environment, then there are definitely certain restrictions or limitations for us. That's true. When you board a flight, you cannot, be sitting in 3 seats. There is a seat which is allotted to you, which has a limited space, and you have to sit in that. That's correct, right? You cannot say that, okay, fine, I'll sleep in 3 seats, or I just keep on changing seats and all that stuff. That is not possible until and unless you do not own that
I mean, until and unless that is your own property. So you have purchased a plane and then you board that flight, that is a different thing. But if you are on a multi-tenant thing where other passengers are there or other tenants are there, then you will be allotted a limited space, right? So that whatever you are doing should not cause any uncomfort to the other people who are there. Same thing is applicable in Salesforce. Now think about Salesforce. Multi-tenant environment, if your code, the code that you are running, if that, runs for a very long time or that is very heavy, so it's quite obvious that it is gonna hit the performance of the main server, which will result in performance issue with other tenants also. So if you are using hello, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me? Yeah, that's fine. All right. So as I told you, because this is a multi-tenant environment, wherever anything is, any company is, using a code that is being executed on the same server. Let's say you are a Salesforce customer. I am a Salesforce customer. I have put a big query on Salesforce, and because of that, their server has stopped working. That will harm you as well, right? You are also a customer. So for that reason, Salesforce has defined limits for everything, so that people do not, put some very heavy code or very heavy tasks on the Apex. So basically, governor limits are related to, most of the times are related to Apex. There is limit to everything in Salesforce. For the declarative things also there is a limitation. For everything there is a limitation. Nothing can be infinite, right? They cannot give anything infinite. For everything there is a limit, but there are more limits on Apex because chances are there. In Apex we are putting our own logics. We are making Salesforce to run our way. The things that they have designed it in a proper way, and they know that the code that has been written is of high quality and that will not affect the performance of others and all that stuff, right? So what they have developed for the declarative method of development, your workflows, approvals, this is also what? There must be some code in the backend, and they must have written some code. So that is their code, that is their logic. So they have written it quite nicely, so limits are a little lesser there. Governor limit concept comes mostly into Apex because this is where we are putting our own logic. So here they have given you, certain limits for everything. Alright. So when I say certain limits for everything, I mean, let's talk about a few examples. Example can be how many queries can be executed, how many results can be returned in one query, how many DML operations can be performed. So limit for everything. These are just a few examples, right? So how many times you can do an update operation? If you run a query, if you run a code which keeps on just doing an update thing, people who have done some sort of programming, somewhere. Might have come across a situation where your program gets into a loop and that does not exit, right? So that sort of thing. If you have started a big update operation and it is continuously going and doing update things, and it does not end, or it keeps on updating 1 million record one by one, so it's ultimately gonna hamper your performance and the performance of others. For that reason, how many DMLs can be done maximum? There's a limit. After that, it will exit. How many queries? Maximum number of queries that can be executed. After that, it will exit. How many results can be returned? It will return a particular number of results on a query. So if you think that a query should return 1 million records, it will not return. There is a limitation. This will return this number of records, no matter how many results actually your query has. For example, you run a query. Just use a simple example. You say select account name. Sorry, select name from account where country equals US. Let's say this is the thing that you want to put, and you have in your database you have 1 million such records where country is US. Alright. Now, but your query will not return 1 million records. It will only return the numbers which is allowed. So first, let's say for query, I think it's 50,000. So maximum number of records which can be written is 50,000. So it will return 50,000, and after that it will stop. So it will give you only first 50,000 records which have been retrieved. That's it. So that is how it is. That Salesforce has made arrangement for governor limits everywhere. Now, why do we need to understand these governor limits? We need to understand these governor limits so that we can optimize our code, or we can write our code in such a manner so that we do not hit these governor limits. Alright. If you hit governor limit, it's not going to hamper the performance of Salesforce anyhow. So Salesforce had made sure that wherever you hit the governor limit, the task will be ended. Alright. The Salesforce will return whatever is permitted on the governor limit, and then the task will get ended. That's it. But you will not get the actual result. Now you were expecting a complete list of countries from US. You finally ended up getting 50,000 only. So that will hit your performance. So Salesforce has made sure that they are safe, their environment is safe. If you want proper results for your Apex coding, you need to understand governor limits and work within those limits. Got that thing? So for governor limits, I'm just going to share a link where we have these limits. Alright, so this is the link that you will need to refer to for governor limits. So if you read it here, let me put this also in this document. It's very nice. Sometimes they in interview they put a question, why do we use governor limit? So if you just use these two lines to explain that, more than enough. Simple logic is, because Apex runs in a multi-tenant environment, that is what I told you. The Apex runtime engine strictly enforces a number of limits. So they enforce a few limits. Okay, and this is what you will get to ensure that runaway Apex doesn't monopolize shared resources, right? So that your Apex code does not monopolize the entire resource, right? If some apex code ever exceeds a limit, the associated governor issues a runtime exception that cannot be handled. So now look at here. The limits. Okay, there are few types of limits, but per transaction and all that stuff. But I'll talk about the transaction thing so that you understand what is a transaction. I'll talk about that. Let's understand the limit here. So total number of SOQL queries that can be issued. How many SOQL queries that you can issue? 100 for synchronous, 200 for asynchronous. All right. I'll talk about synchronous and asynchronous also. All right. Total number of records retrieved by SOQL query, 50,000. Okay. Total number of records retrieved by database.getQueryLocator. This getQueryLocator or database, this is a class, so we will talk a little on this very later. Look into SOSL. So SOQL queries that can be issued is 100, and this on one transaction. So one transaction is once your Apex code runs and it commits the data into the database, right? So that complete thing is a transaction. Okay. So in one transaction, you can have maximum 100 queries. All right. Total number of SOSL queries issued, 20. Alright, so SOSL has a lesser limit because we have seen while writing SOSL, we have seen that SOSL usually takes longer to be executed. So they have given a lesser limit for SOSL. And SOSL can return to up to 2000 records. Okay, so this is the number of records which can be retrieved by SOSL. Alright. Total number of DML statements which can be issued is 150. So in one transaction you cannot have more than 150 DML operation. So you cannot have 200 DML operations in one, right? Then again it will throw exception. So this phase. Now there are a lot of other things in terms of your governor limits. We don't need to get into each and everything. Next governor limit that I want you to understand is on the emails thing. We have sent emails, right? That using trigger we sent email. Outbound email. Okay, so single email message method we used, right? How many emails can we send? Maximum in a day. You can send mass email to a maximum of 1000 external email addresses per day. So if you think that using trigger I will keep on sending more than 10,000 emails in a day, no, 1000 is the limit. All right. And that too per transaction, like one method cannot send more than 250 emails. Okay, so that one send method cannot send more than 250 emails. And for enterprise edition it's 500, for unlimited it's 1000. Right? So this is for mass email, not for single email message. So single email, you can send 100 emails per single email message. So there are two types of email methods: single email message and mass email message. Mass email message, this is the limit. So for enterprise edition you can send 500. For single email message you can send 100. And this 100 is per single email message. Per single email message means, remember we had created a trigger, and in that we defined two addresses, which was a list of strings, right? So in that two addresses, if it is a single email message, that list cannot be of more than 100 emails. So one email method, send email method, cannot send emails to more than 100 if it's a single email message. If it's a mass email message, then it can send maximum 500 for enterprise edition. Alright. Overall number of emails that can be sent per day, no matter how many email messages you are using, but one day overall emails that can be sent using your Apex is 1000, which includes single as well as mass. Got that thing? So that is how it is. So this email limit is not only for Apex, email limit is for our workflows as well. On the workflow we have an email alert option. There is a limit for workflow email alerts also. But there you have a little more number of emails available to be sent per day. So for workflow, I think there is 1000 email per user. So depending on how many users your company has, it's 1000 emails per user which can be sent through workflow. If you have 5 users, you can send 5000 emails through workflow, and you can send 1000 emails per day from your Apex. So total then you will have a 6000 emails per day capacity. So that is the thing. Got this thing? So this ways, governor limit is for everything. I would not suggest or recommend that you get into each and every thing, the governor limit of everything. The moment you are dealing with that thing and you need to know the governor limit, you can get into that and understand that thing. Otherwise, no point confusing yourself. As of now, if you understand the governor limits for DML, if you understand the governor limits for queries, SOQL and SOSL, that should be fine. And the emailers, right? So if these things you understand, that is fine. Now, the next thing is optimizing your, so governor limit we have understood. Now we have to work on the code in such a way that it does not hit the governor limit. So we try to do that. How do we try to do that? There are a couple of examples on that I will share with you. You can refer to that. Alright. So this is where you have an example. I'll share the link. This on my blog itself. So the trick is that, see, we have limit in both the places, right? We have a limit on the number of queries, and then we also have a limit on the number of DML operation, and we also have a limit of how many records can be processed in one query, or how many records can be retrieved in one query, right? So we have to actually do a mix and match to make sure that we skip the governor limit. So this is this is an example of the same. Here what you see is, for example, if you have 1,000 records, okay, which need to be updated. Let's say I have 1,000 records which need to be updated. Okay, what I do, sometimes I run a loop for something update A. Now the problem is, if this loop runs 1,000 times, for 1,000 records it will run 1,000 times, right? It will need to run 1,000 times. The problem here is that it can only perform this update operation 150 times. So my all 1,000 records will not get updated. Got that thing? So the solution to this would be, if I, instead of doing update for something, I create a list of whatever account or something, and instead of doing an update operation, I keep on adding the values to the list. So I create a list, and on that loop I keep on, the loop should exit here. Then what happens here? In the loop, what you are doing, you are just adding the value to a variable, which is a list. So values get added to the variable. Once it is complete, you perform an update operation. Got the logic? So here what we have done, we have bulkified the DML operation. If you do not bulkify DML operation, then you will have too many DML operations, and the chances are more that you will hit the limit. So the same example, I just tried to show you a very small glimpse of it. Same example have been defined here. The for loop iterates over line opportunities contained on this thing. Okay, so if I do this for opportunity, this thing, update this, then what will happen? It's not a good practice, since governor limit might be hit. Okay, so if it contains 150 opportunities, till 150 it will run fine, but for the record next to that, the 150 first record, that will run a runtime exception, because you have hit the governor limit. So 150 will be updated, others will not get updated. So that is the thing. Now, how do we fix this? For fixing it, this is the example. The same example as I told you. Define a list of it. Keep on adding things to the list. So updated list is the list of opportunities. Keep on adding the values to the list, and then finally say update the list. So this list will be updated. So this way you can avoid this DML operation governor limit. Got it? So this can also be a question. I think most of you are clear on this. Anyone has a question here? This is a very simple example. You can relate it to anything else. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, Jit, like in for loop, like record by record, it will be updated, right? That's the problem. And in the second one, like all list will be updated once.
Yes. See, the for loop gets
Okay.
exited. Here, what is happening? This update statement comes outside the for loop. So whatever records on the for loop, they will be added to the list. It comes out of the loop and then it performs update. So one update operation. And then this entire list of records will be updated at once.
Okay. Thank you.
So this is a good way of writing, the code. So gradually, more you work on these things, you will start getting an idea. Now, whenever you write a code, just try and keep these things in mind that, okay, can my operation hit the governor limit? If I am putting something inside a loop or something, even if it is not within the loop, see, this is where you have not even put it inside the loop. You have not created a loop. It's a for instance that is used in trigger by default. Why in trigger we have the for instance? Why do we have for in trigger? Because trigger can work for a single record, it can work for multiple records as well. A trigger should work if you are doing a bulk upload, right? If I am trying to upload 100 records at one time, at that time also trigger should work. Before insert or after insert, whatever trigger logics I have defined, those should work. For that reason, trigger always has a for, so that it does not, if for is not there, if you do not define for in a trigger, then what will happen? When someone is trying to enter 100 records into it, trigger will execute once for the first record and other 99 records trigger will not fire. That we don't need, that we don't want, right? So trigger is most of the times for. So if you directly put an update kind of a thing here, then chances are there that you will hit the governor limit very quickly. Till the time you are dealing with 5, 10, 20, 50, 100 records, it will not harm you anyhow. But yes, the moment it exceeds 150, it will start throwing error. Got this thing? So if you kind of use this example or learn this example properly, fine. And this is basically writing optimized Apex coding. So if you learn this example at least, this can be very useful in one of your interviews. If the interviewer wants to know, have you worked with governor limit or do you have understanding? If you explain this example, the interviewer would understand that you have fair understanding of it. Alright, so we have understood the governor limit. Our objectives, examples though is absolutely fine, but what we have to understand is our objective should be how can we avoid the governor limits. So let us do things so that we do not tend to hit the governor limit very quickly, that sort of things. Alright, okay. There is another thing that I'm going to talk about, and that is transaction. So what is a transaction in Salesforce? Transaction in Salesforce is, where a complete cycle of, some events till the time the data is committed inside into the database. All right. So transaction basically refers to this set of operations that are executed as a single unit. Okay, so there can be a transaction which is very particular to the Apex code, or it can be a complete transaction when a record is created or something, right? So set of operations will include what all things? Set of operations will include things like starting from, see, when there is a DML happening, data manipulation, either you're creating a record, or if you're updating a record, or if you're trying to delete a record, right? Now what happens here, there are a lot of things which happen in the backend. What all things go in the backend? There are certain system validations, right? System validations, there are field validations, then there are the triggers, then there are the workflow rules, then your custom validations that you have defined. So all these things actually happen before any DML. That's true, right? So a transaction is a combination of all these things. Got it? So basically for transaction, either the this entire set of operation, either this entire thing happens, or it does not happen, or it's completely rolled back. Got that? So if let's say your validation rule is not your validation rule is restricting the record to be created, so record will not be created, right? It will throw an error. Or if your trigger is not working, your trigger is restricting the record from being created, so throw error, that sort of thing, right? So all these combined together are called a transaction. So transaction, for simple things which are executed as a single unit on any DML, okay, whenever you are creating, editing. So let me show you the transaction flow. So when we are talking about a transaction, we also need to understand a little on the order of execution, the flow that I'm talking about, right? So you know what is a transaction. Now, since there are so many things which I told you are there in a transaction, one transaction holds the validation rules, the triggers, the workflow rules, a lot of things, right? So since there are so many things in that transaction, now the next thing that we have to understand is what is the order of execution of those. So here is a link for that. Order of execution. Alright, so here is the link for that. So you see this, so first of all your system validations are things like, have you entered the value in the field in the right format, have you put the right number of characters which are to be put. So system validations are something which are enforced by default. You have not defined a validation rule.
System automatically does the validation rule. If it's a mandatory field, you have not given value. If it's a text field, you have, if it's a number field, you have entered text there. Or if the length allowed is 10, you have allowed 20. So this first thing which works. So if this list looks a little longer, let me cut it short for you. So first thing that in a DML happens is, first of all, system validation, all system validation, right? So as I told you, the fields and all those things it will check. Are you entering the right kind of values and all those things? So that is the first thing that's checked. Okay. Okay. Layout specific rules, value field formats and all these things. So after system validation, the next thing that the Salesforce will check is your before triggers. Before triggers means before insert, before update triggers. Remember, those logics will be executed. Okay. Executes all before triggers. All right. Then it executes your validation rules, custom validations. So before triggers and then your custom validations. So this custom validations include the validations which we have defined. We can create validation rules, right? So these are your validation rules created by user. And then after trigger will get executed, and then your OOTD. All right. So before triggers, validations, after triggers, and OOTD is out of the box. So what all out of the box business logics you have defined, which will include things like assignment rule, auto response rule, workflow rule. So all these things will get executed. Fine. Now what happens here is OOTD will include things like assignment rule. Now you just need to remember that is a long story there. So you just need to remember it in this sequence: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if there is a issue with the system validation itself, then it never goes to before trigger. Alright. So this is the order. Now everything, apart from this, all your assignment rule, workflows and other things, basically, or auto response will come here. So this complete thing starting from here till here is a transaction. Got this? This entire thing is a transaction. Whenever you are doing a DML, these are the things in this order of execution. These things happen, and this entire thing is a transaction. So our normal DML operation, the usual DML that we use, which is insert on Apex, update, right? These DML operations, either they complete the entire transaction or they roll back the entire transaction. For these DML operations, either the entire transaction is completed or it is completely rolled back. Got it? There is another DML operation which we will talk in tomorrow's session. In that you can perform half action as well, right? So a partial thing can be done. But our normal DML operations either perform the entire transaction or they completely roll back the things. Got it? So we will talk on, that is called database DML. So we'll talk on that in tomorrow's session, and we'll talk on a few more concepts on Apex. So we will meet tomorrow same time then. I think there is quite a few stuff that you guys will need to work on. I'm just copying this entire stuff and I'll put it in an email and send it to you.
Ajit, have you covered sandbox and deployment as well?
Yes, last session we were talking about that.
Actually, Ajit, I just skipped that session. Could you please send it a recorded session if it's possible?
Recorded, I have uploaded, I guess. I will just share the link. Recorded thing, I think I have shared. I'll share the link with you all again,
Okay.
in case anyone missed it.